Call the meeting to order for today. First item is approval of today's agenda.
Mr. Chair, I move approval with the agenda addition.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve today's agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Citizens to be heard. Any citizens that would like to be heard on any item that is not on today's agenda? Seeing none, next item is approval of minutes from the September 10th meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the September 10th minutes. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Approval of payment of bills and vouchers.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to pay the bills. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And let's see, the next item is recognition of Sheriff Empting and so who's going to, Josh, you're going to take care of that? Come on up. Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, there's the...
Still finishing his breakfast.
Oh.
All right. Thank you for allowing us a little bit of time to recognize the sheriff and Becky Unterseer. What this is a nomination for a Stork Award. What that is an award that's issued to citizens and first responders that firsthand help out with delivery of children outside of a hospital room. So I had written something up here for to read, so I will go ahead with that. It is my privilege, along with the Barnesville Ambulance Service, to nominate Sheriff Mark Empting and Becky Unterseer for the Stork Award. This award is given to first responders and the public when they actively assist with the delivery of a child. On August 31st, 2019, Sheriff Mark Empting had worked a full day at the annual Steam Threshers reunion in Rolog. Late that evening, the sheriff headed home to rest up for another day in Rolog. While he was on his way home, he heard a call come over the radio at approximately 8:25 p.m. The sheriff was at County Road 10 and 250th Street, and this call was coming out about a mile or so west of him. It initially sounded like a traffic complaint, but the sheriff quickly learned that it was a female in labor call. Sheriff Empting immediately responded to the location of the call. The caller was still traveling west, trying their best to beat the clock. But as a parent, I can tell you that baby's time is baby's time. Sheriff Empting could see the vehicle traveling west about a mile ahead of him. He pulled up to it as it slowed to a stop at County Road 10 and 205th Street. Inside the car was the expectant mother, Bobby Joe, and along with her was her sister Katie, her mother Becky, and her current son Easton. Within seconds of Sheriff Empting getting to the vehicle, baby Aiden Olson had arrived into the caring hands of Grandma Becky. I can only assume that was a moment Grandma Becky will always remember. The umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck, and there were some concerns about his breathing. Without hesitation, Sheriff Empting went into action as he has always done in his career as a public servant. He assisted with unwrapping the umbilical cord and clearing the airways for baby Aiden. Baby Aiden was breathing happily and quietly. Sheriff Empting tied off the umbilical cord with some verbal help from a dispatcher that was currently on the Bluetooth system for the vehicle, which is another plus to Minnesota's hands-free law. A towel was retrieved from the sheriff's car, which was used to keep Aiden warm and happy. They waited on scene for the crew from Barnesville Ambulance to arrive. Barnesville Ambulance staff was able to cut the umbilical cord and safely transport Bobby Joe and baby Aiden to an area hospital, all the while keeping them safe and comfortable. Sheriff Empting has never shied away from public service. If a call for help comes out and he hears it, you can all but guarantee he will be the first on scene and the first to jump in and help. He is a working sheriff and a public servant that has worn a uniform for 22 years and has continued to devote his life to public service. So I can say, from handing out stickers, fighting fires, and now delivering babies, Sheriff Empting continues to defy what the true level of service one person can provide. So on behalf of the Sheriff's Office and Barnesville Ambulance Service, I would like to recognize Sheriff Mark Empting and Becky Unterseer with the Stork Award. And also thank the Olson family for joining us today, and for the work the Barnesville Ambulance Service does for the residents of Clay County and for those traveling through it.
Anybody else who would like to say anything this morning?
I got one thing.
Yeah.
Hi. My name is Isaac Olson. I'm Aiden's dad, and I was not there. I was at work at the FM Redhawks, and just personally, thank you, Sheriff Empting. Thank you, Becky, for being there for my family. It meant a lot to me. That was probably the most terrifying 15 minutes of my life. Not knowing what was going on, just go to the hospital. I think the time between calls from Katie was less than 10 minutes, and it was, hey, or Bobby called and said, hey, my water broke, and then Katie called a few minutes later and said, so, baby's here. I was like, okay, see you at the hospital. But seriously, a huge, huge thank you to your service and for helping get our baby out and healthy, and Becky, thanks for catching him. Thanks, guys.
Thank you all, and congratulations, Sheriff Empting and Becky. Great work. And what a well-behaved guy this morning for our meeting.
Wish I wasn't sick. I just cold.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is a budget update and approval of a resolution for a preliminary levy. Steve? This doesn't sound like anywhere near as much fun as the last time.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Before you this morning is a preliminary levy resolution for your consideration. This resolution would set the maximum levy which our citizens of Clay County can be assessed for 2020. It would also allow Lori the opportunity to certify a budget per state statute by the end of September. In approving this levy, or this resolution, if you did that, we would be only being able to adjust the levy down and not any increases moving forward. The resolution also identifies a potential truth in taxation date, December 3rd at 6 p.m. is what we would be looking at. And this board has also historically moved their board meeting from 8:30 till 5 or 5:30, depending on the agenda. Again, when we look at our budgets each year, from each of our departments are focused on fixed costs. The biggest costs that we have in each of our budgets are our staff. What's made this a little bit more interesting and challenging this year is about a year ago, this board approved our HR department to go out and look at different companies to do market studies. David Drowns and Associate were selected, and as a part of that process, it's provided some interesting discussions. Our first update that we presented to the board was just over 13%. We were given a clear message at that point that 13% was not going to be acceptable, and so we went back with Lori and our staff, department heads, to look to ways to cut and mitigate that percentage. Throughout this process, the last couple of months, we've provided different updates as we move forward. This past month, or past week at the board meeting, we covered some of the mitigations and the cuts that we've looked at in this budget process, and we also went over the revenues and expenditures. And so before you this morning, you have a resolution which would provide a levy increase of 5.85% and a certified levy of $35,014,703. And with that, I would turn it over to the board for any additional questions or comments.
Any questions for Steve or Lori on this item?
Well, I guess I'll make a comment, Mr. Chair. I think it's, we've really spent several months going over this and trying to see where we could best use taxpayers' dollars. And And I want to compliment the departments. I really feel that they have been understanding in terms of where we wanted to go with the budget and not making frivolous requests. And I think while this increase is larger than all of us probably would want, we made a commitment, this board, when I was chair a year ago, to make sure that employees were being compensated fairly, and I think in turn, that action will actually save taxpayers' dollars in the end, to make sure that we're aligned that way. And so I just want to relay my appreciation to the taxpayers for the understanding of, I hope that we're doing the best that we can with their dollars, and I really think that you both have been diligent about looking to additional areas for revenues or where we can cut, or balances that may be a little in excess to help keep this down. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
I would like to commend them for their creativity in this whole process.
What are the board's wishes?
I'll make a motion to approve the levy at 5.85.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I do, this is preliminary, as I said before. Prior to our final, I would like to request again the detail of the new requests. I know we had had several discussions about some of them, and I just want to remind myself again what all is in there, in that new request. And
You should have that in the last board packet you got. It should be the last page.
oh, okay. I can go back. And then going on what Commissioner Mojo said, I think this year we had a really good opportunity to better distinguish with our employees and for our taxpayers what is compensation and what is benefits. And I think in this process, we're going to be able to do something that probably any other year would have been very difficult to accomplish both. And it's kind of a one-time. It's a considerable amount of dollars. But I think moving forward, when we go to do comparisons, we're going to be comparing apples to apples and not something else. We might have a market study that says we are below this or we're above that, but it doesn't take into consideration the benefits piece. And our benefits piece might be much better, or it might be much worse than some that we compare to. But going on in the future now, we are going to be comparing apples for apples, and that's something for a long time in the future will benefit this county, so, and its employees. So I don't normally like to support this large of an increase, but because of where we're at with our most important component of our organization is our employees, I support this. So.
Just want to correct my motion. It was a preliminary budget. I'm approving, not the final budget.
And I would note, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, that on the health insurance piece of that, we'll be looking at savings. Talking with Lori, we really don't have a way to project that. And so if things can progress as they have in previous years, there'll be some additional savings to this.
And they have not been incorporated.
They have not been incorporated in this.
Okay, any other comments or discussion here? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Thank you. Thanks, Lori.
Well done, you guys.
Steve, the next item is yours also.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before you, we have change order number 25. This change order relates only to the law enforcement. The total change dollar amount would be $70,457. Many of the issues that are on here today have to do with code. I'm just going to touch on a couple of the larger dollar number ones unless there's a specific question that you want to have. The first one I would touch on is CP 32, and adding a heater in the boiler plant over in Joe Olson's area. As you're aware, part of this project, we put in a new boiler. With the new damper system, it was a challenge that cold air got into the building, and we were having issues with keeping things warm. And so again, here's an example where Joe's ingenuity and kind of looking outside of maybe the initial projection saved the county a great deal of money. I know there's a cost here, but the other options were much more significant in price. The next one I'd like to touch on is PR 68, adding services for laundry and chemical supplier. The area throughout the corrections facility has chemical areas where they can pre-mix solutions. Unfortunately, in the planning process, that was not added, so we had to add $15,884 in mechanical, plumbing, and electrical rough-ins, and also some issues with the dishwasher area. CP 39, city mandate requirements for current code, had to do with the ramps and the widths of our sidewalks, making sure that they're meeting ADA standards. There's also some elevation work and moving from a standard rebar to poly-coated rebar. And the final one, and the largest one, is PR 69, a sump pump in our elevator shaft. Initially, the hope and the goal was that we were going to be able to be allowed to grandfather in our elevator shaft. In all new builds now, there's a requirement to have a drain that takes any excess water. As they begin to do some work on the elevator shaft itself, it was determined that there was some potential water issues underneath the cement, and so we had to look at, we couldn't add a drain, so we looked at adding the sump pump, and the work that was involved in that was a total of $31,267.
I guess that's one good thing about building in a wet cycle year, is that you identify the water issue quickly.
Yeah, I think the comment they said at our last meeting was there was 4 hoses kind of pouring water into that pit. And I wouldn't want to be in the elevator that hits the bottom floor and you open the door.
Like a horror movie.
Yeah.
The burning inferno.
So, and again, it's, when you look at a $50-some million project, what we're talking about here, the end result is we're still, on those two between those two projects, we have still contingency dollars left over, and the LEC now is closed out, so, and that one had its entire $250,000 contingency left in it, so.
Mr. Chair, I would just note, and we've had some discussion on this CP 35B. Again, this was a situation where our royal flush, we had our royal flush issues with the things with the toilets in the jail. Here's an example again where Joe Olson and his staff, we bought the kits and Joe went and installed them, and that was over a $10,000 savings on this issue. So
That was very helpful. So. Any questions for Steve?
I move approval of change order number 25.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve change order number 25. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Thank you, Steve.
My final issue today was from a discussion, needing to have a follow-up discussion. On September 10th, Mr. Curtis Olson, Max Schneider, and Attorney Jonathan Novak provided a presentation on the possibility of Clay County looking to join an opioid lawsuit. I've had some individual conversations with you over the last couple of weeks, but as a board, we haven't had the opportunity to talk about that presentation and what the potential wishes would be. And so I thought it would be good for us to have that discussion. I do have, Mr. Olafson is here. He is here to ask any questions. He doesn't have any presentation necessarily to provide today, but if you have any questions of him, he would be available to answer them.
Okay, any questions for Steve or Mr. Olafson?
I don't know, I guess I do have a question in some way, but it's something that I don't expect today, but it seems to me that, you know, if we go out on our own, or not on our own, but join a group, when it comes to any awards that there might be, what are we going to have to do to prove why we should get what we get? How do we prove that the construction of a new jail was related to opioids, or what portion was related to opioids? That's just one of the many things. How do we get in and I mean being able to prove in a court system that, you know, that we have factual information as to, you know, and I don't know, maybe Brian would like to comment on that too, but I think we have a long way to go. I would need to have answers like that before I make a commitment in terms of what we would need to do to you know, justify an award we might be seeking.
Mr. Olafson, you'd like to address that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, and good morning, members of the commission. And it's a very good question that you are asking, and it's a very common question. And what I can say in response is that we have an attorney in the office in Dallas, Texas, that specializes in designing the plaintiff fact sheet. This details your damages, your actual costs, details what has happened in your county. You don't have to provide a large amount of information in order for this plaintiff fact sheet to be completed. I can share with you that the county auditor in a very busy western oil patch in western North Dakota prepared all of the county budgets going back to 2008, and everything that the county needed to provide to the attorney to fill out the plaintiff fact sheet. She spent less than an hour on it. So that would be the time required of a county employee. Now that varies from county to county, of course, because counties obviously, some counties have very good records and others not so good. But that's just one example of it. It's not a burdensome process. And any award that you would receive would be based on your actual damages. It's not going to be a settlement based on population. It's factored in to this plaintiff fact sheet, your actual damages. So if you've had to have significant expenditures on improving a jail, for example, you would document that in your plaintiff fact sheet, and that would be factored in. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I think it kind of goes a little bit further than that. When it comes to court, you can have somebody from Dallas, Texas filling out a fact sheet for us, but when it comes to testifying in court, we're going to need to have local people justifying exactly what, you know, the things you talk about. And how do you, I don't know how we put dollar values on the opioid. Certainly it's a crisis, and certainly it's caused problems throughout the country. But I don't know how we're going to be able to I don't know how we're going to.
How do you quantify it?
Yeah, quantify it. And then on top of that, I have some further questions on why are we potentially taking a position opposite of what our state is taking on this. You know, I look back to, you know, and I think in your presentation, you talked about the tobacco tax settlement that had happened a long time ago. And, you know, that money, you know, if I recall how that worked, that money went to the state and then it funneled back to, you know, counties and municipalities. And a lot of that was used for future prevention. You know, and I know our public health department used a lot of those dollars from that, for that purpose. And so I don't know, you know, I don't know, I'm not so sure I know what the state's intentions would be. If, you know, there's sometimes where maybe it's best to let the state take the lead on behalf of all of our counties. And you know, I think, Commissioner Mojo, were you the one that talked about maybe through AMC talking about this, and AMC didn't take a position on it, did they?
You're on Health and Human Services.
No, they didn't.
Yeah.
They were cautious about it, and
I don't know if they were
Spoke
looking
about
at, again, looking at the state.
that's what they were
You
looking
know,
at, yeah.
Some of the things we do, we got to be careful that we don't conflict with the state of Minnesota on, you know, because we're basically an arm of them. So the quantifying piece, and, you know, I'd like a little bit more information on, you know, if the state is doing it, what's their intentions, if they're successful, and how are they gonna maybe share in some of that with our counties. I haven't heard that piece of it yet, so.
Yeah, well, Ed, you brought up several issues there, and I'd like to address each of them. In terms of what your state attorney general is doing, from what I can determine based on news reports, your state attorney general has filed suit against only Purdue Pharmaceuticals, which is also what my good friend, the AG in North Dakota, did. His suit was dismissed in court in Bismarck earlier this year, so he has no case. Purdue has been since then, Purdue has filed for bankruptcy. Our Attorney General is going to appeal. The fact that Purdue has filed for bankruptcy is going to seriously complicate his appeal. Also, Purdue is pursuing dismissal of suits in other states. So your Attorney General's suit could be in jeopardy based on the dismissal of the North Dakota suit. They're going to use that as a precedent. And I don't know how the tobacco settlement money played out here in Minnesota, but in North Dakota, only 10% went back to the counties. And as far as your Association of Counties taking a position, it sounds to me from what you've described here, and I don't know anything beyond that, your Association of Counties is doing the same thing as the Association of Counties in North Dakota. They are not stepping in and telling counties, here is what you should do. They're taking a neutral position, letting each county decide on their own whether they're going to take action or not.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, excuse me.
Yeah.
Mr. Olson, I can confirm, I did talk to Julie Ring at our AMC policy meeting, and that is exactly how she explained it from the AMC position in Minnesota.
Okay, thank you. And one last point relating to your concerns. As far as having to prove in court or testify in court, you won't have to do that because there will be what they call bellwether cases, which will be heard, I believe, starting next month. At least that's when they were scheduled. Sorry. They can't try 2,300 cases. Mm-hmm. So they will try 2 or 3 or 4 bellwether cases. I think it'll be 4 at the most. And based on the outcome of those bellwether cases, then there's a very complex system that will be plugged into the settlements. There'll be a settlement committee, and there'll be, based on the results of the bellwether cases, that's where, and your plaintiff fact sheet, that will all be factored into what your actual settlement will end up being. You won't have to send your county attorney to Ohio to testify on your behalf. unless he really wanted to go. But it's not going to be a situation where you're going to have a lot of burden to prove your damages in court. That's just not the way it's going to work. But it's an understandable concern.
Maybe I can just speak up for a minute and just talk a little bit about this. I mean, so I would just say, you know, when this started back in 2016, you saw several county attorneys that filed out of Ramsey and Hennepin County, and some of those filed initially, and the county attorney specifically asked to file suit. I, as county attorney, I would say I'm not supportive of the idea of filing suit. There's an opiate epidemic response act that the state has put together. That has an advisory council, it has a response account, and that has specific statutory language that they're looking at, that if ultimately suing certain manufacturers were to occur or other settlements were to happen, would be based on placement of children through social services where family members that had opiate issues where they couldn't take care of their children and had to place children outside of the home. So really social service stances and then tribal council or tribal services that have had issues within tribal areas as well. So my position would be, I think that just what you had said, Commissioner Campbell, allowing the state to move forward and look at it and do that. I have some specific issues I think I maybe discussed with one or two of you. When we look at and say, as a county, we're responding to all types of issues, whether that's methamphetamine, whether that's opioids, whether that's fentanyl that, you know, move into the county. We address it both as a prosecution issue as well as a issue of trying to deal with through drug court. If we have addicted people that we want to try to get off that addictive substance without going to prison and become a productive member of society again, or we have to deal with it through social services and CHIPS placements. All those things are pieces that we do deal with. But I would just say that the idea of trying to only narrowly focus and sue one certain person and say they're responsible, or one entity, I don't believe is correct. I mean, I think there's a cascade of issues, whether it's from manufacturer through, I mean, then we're talking about pharmacies, we're talking about hospitals and doctors. I mean, it's still a drug that's prescribed and given out today. I mean, and it still has benefits that we look at and have to balance and decide, do we want to issue it out and give that drug out for certain reasons to prescribe it to treat someone versus not prescribing all. I mean, I think if I go back to, and I would just want to comment that several years back, probably about 10 years ago, we had what was really becoming and starting to become an epidemic of manufacture of methamphetamine. And when we saw that happening, the legislature took control of that issue and put pseudoephedrine behind the counter at pharmacies, and then we also locked down the chemicals on farms and had certain laws to do those things. And we went from having almost weekly enforcement where we're catching people that were doing manufacture, went from say 5 to 10 a month manufacturing cases to 0. And I would say over the last 10 years we've probably seen 0. I have not prosecuted a manufacturer case in probably a good 10 years. So that's sometimes where we see a response from the legislature that really has an impact. If we truly said this is something that should not be out there whatsoever, then it should be outlawed completely. And that'd be something that the legislature has to look at and say we need to do that if we want to say that that's the response that needs to happen. But in my mind, to go after and sue just one specific entity, I don't think is the correct way. I think allowing the state to do whatever they think they need to do, allow that to come through social services would be an appropriate place to when you're talking about how to see actual results or problems that come from that. That's a definite quantifiable thing that we can do. And so I, as a county attorney, would not be supportive of the idea. And I guess I'm open to other questions about our discussion, but that's just my thoughts.
Thank you, Brian.
If I may respond, I completely agree with your county attorney that it makes no sense to sue only one defendant. That's what our Attorney General did in North Dakota, and it's my understanding, unless I've missed something, that that's what your Attorney General is doing here in Minnesota. The consortium of firms that I represent are pursuing up to 30 defendants, including all of the major manufacturers, including the 3 major distributors, including the chain pharmacies. And so there's up to 30 defendants. And you mentioned county attorneys filing suit in Minnesota, and I know that has happened. And the Attorney General in Minnesota and North Dakota are not the only 2 attorneys general in the nation who are pursuing action on their own. But no county attorney and no attorney general in the nation has the resources or the expertise and the experience within their staff to pursue litigation this complex. We have a consortium of over 200 attorneys, several hundred support staff. We have the resources and the expertise. These are all pharmaceutical litigation companies, and that's a critical distinction. Your attorney is absolutely right, and that's in fact why the suit was tossed out of court and it was dismissed in Bismarck. The judge specifically commented on that it made no sense to sue, to try to hold one party responsible for the crisis.
Any other comments or questions, or what are the board's wishes, either to join or not join, or get more information? What would you like?
And if you have additional questions, we can certainly pass them along to our expert attorneys in Dallas and get written answers to explanations to any questions or concerns that remain.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I would note I've made a couple of reach outs to the Minnesota Attorney General's office just to try to get some of the information that you've asked about and maybe their official position. And to this point, they haven't returned our call. So.
Jenny, you guys?
Yeah, I think this is difficult all around, specifically because it's the opioid crisis, right? I mean, we've all dealt with this, and we continue to deal with this, and we continue to try to find answers. And at this point, I just am not comfortable pursuing this legal action just personally. I'm not, there's too many, I'm not sure the cost, I'm not sure, I'm just not sure it's the right avenue, and I just, not there yet.
Motion?
Not a motion.
Oh, it's not a motion, okay.
I have a tendency to agree with our county attorney on this, and I still would like to know where the state is at. I think, going through our administrator, maybe getting some more information on that. I think that's where we should leave this right now. That's a big step to move to get into a lawsuit, and I don't take that lightly.
Are we gonna miss out on something if we don't join the lawsuit, though?
Money, potentially.
Well, the judge and the settlement committee in the Northern District of Ohio have made it clear that at some point the window of opportunity to join and be in the most advantageous place possible someday is going to close, and we believe that could be any time. And we don't know when that will be. We don't know exactly how that will look, what will happen, whether that will take people who file. You'll always be able to file, but to be, as my understanding, but to be in the most advantageous place possible, the sooner the better.
It looks like maybe what we need is a little more information. Jim, you had a comment?
I guess what I have trouble with is a lawsuit involving retail stores in our community. That's a big deal to me. Right down the street from my shop is a Walgreens shop. There's a CVS. What are the other ones that are being sued as part of this? Rite Aid, and what's the other one? You mentioned 4 big retailers. Walmart?
There's several
And
retail pharmacies.
we've done backflips in this community to try and entice these people to come and open their businesses here. This does not look good to me, in my humble opinion. that we should do something like this. It's analogous to the closing the ramps after we enticed Menards to open a shop
Well,
off the interstate.
in terms of
It's-
the
it's,
of the defendants,
go ahead.
yeah, in terms of the defendants named in your suit, if you specifically want certain entities excluded, that's your right to do that. The litigation does not target medical professionals or medical institutions, for example, but we have had clients around the country who have said, listen, we've got a doctor in our community that's been acting really badly. We want that doctor named in the suit. And we do that upon your request. If you have a request to exclude certain entities, we're certainly happy to do that. That's not a problem.
I'm just not in favor of the whole thing. I'm just going to vote against it.
Mr. Chair, just going to Commissioner Gross's question, might we lose something? That's precisely what I want to know from the state of Minnesota, what their intentions are. Because if the state of Minnesota is part of this process and they're doing it on behalf of the counties, then, I think it's probably appropriate to let them do it. That's where I'm at on it. That's where I want more information. Now, if they turn around and say, hey, counties, you're on your own, what we get, then maybe it's worthy of talking about. But I do agree with Commissioner Haney on when we start targeting, and I don't care whether they're national organizations or not, when they're doing business in your community and they also provide services. I don't know if, I have to go in and get prescriptions filled once in a while, and there's long lines when I go there. And those places are needed too, and we don't need to make it more expensive for them to operate in our communities by having to be liable for lawsuits that, they're filling the jars based on prescriptions prescribed by somebody else, as far as I'm concerned. So we can go on and on.
Let's do this, Steve. See if you can get a response back from the Attorney General's office in Minnesota. And maybe you can bring the sheriff and social services director and the county attorney together and see if they have some information for us that might be pertinent, and then we'll make a decision and move forward as soon as we possibly can, so. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Mr.
Thank you.
Olson.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, let's see, next item, information on next generation 911 GIS. Mark Sloan. Good morning, Mark.
Morning. Just wanted to come today just to keep you up to date what's going on out there and what we're working on. All right, so little history, backstory here is landline telephone had a wire, and that wire was hooked to a phone line that was provided by a phone company, and there was an address assigned to that. If you picked up that phone, dial 911, well, still today, you pick up, dial 911, that address associated with that phone line is passed through to the regional dispatch center, where that information is compared to something called the Master Street Address Guide, or the MSAG, and then from that it pops up on their screen and says, here's the emergency responders you need to send to that call. Well, that was pretty impressive when it came to life, and it's something called Enhanced 911 or E911, and it worked great for a long time until the advent of cell phones. Now 80% of the 911 calls that are sent in are from cell phones, and they don't have that same piece of information, so it's a little harder for the dispatchers to determine exactly where the call is coming from. So to address that, there's a nationwide push to something called Next Generation 911. And what that does is it replaces the Master Street Address Guide with GIS data. And the GIS data then is used to figure out who should respond to the call, where it is, and who should respond to it. So we've been working now for a while, a couple of years already, and we've been asked to continue to work to get our data ready for Next Generation 911, which means we need to make some changes to it. We need to meet a new set of standards. There's a bunch of stuff we have to do. This is one of those times where we've been in GIS a long time, 20 years we've had this data. Well, we were so far in front of a lot of people that we had to invent some of the things we did. So it's a little bit more work for us to meet the new standards just because we're a leader in what was happening. But we're working towards that, and we're going to be working on it over the next year. Our goal is to be done by end of 2020 to have all of our data ready for next generation 911 and able to be used for that purpose. One thing that's challenging a little bit for us is we have state of Minnesota standards we've been asked to meet, but our dispatch center is in North Dakota. So we have North Dakota standards we also have to deal with, which isn't that cumbersome. It's something we deal with already, in that we translate our data and send it over there for them to use already. So it's something I think we'll work through. But one of the reasons I wanted to come today is talk about this is because it's going to have a big impact on our GIS staff. We'll be trying to spend more and more time trying to get our data ready and trying to make sure we hit the timelines that the state's asking us to hit. One of the things they're doing for us is they have an opportunity for some grant money to help offset some of the costs. And in our region, there's, each of the counties is up for a different amount of funds, but for us, and I don't know what exactly we're going to get for money, but I know it can be up to a little over $52,000. So I'm going to apply for that grant, and I just wanted you to know that I'm doing that in case you're talking to some of your counterparts from neighboring counties and say, yeah, we're trying to get that money too. The money will be used, we're not planning to use any outside resources for this project. We're doing it all in-house, but we'll use some of the money to offset maybe some overtime for our GIS specialist, and we'll also probably use our GIS technician more. That's a variable hour position. My hope is to maybe use that person to do some of the day-to-day GIS work to free us up to do this. So that's kind of where we're trying to go with this whole project. And so I want to just let you know that it's here. We're working on it. We'll be ready. Our data right now is at about 90% match rates on everything, so we're actually in really good shape. But we'll get there, and we'll provide good data for this.
Good.
Anybody have any questions?
Questions for Mark on that?
Thanks for being proactive on it.
Yeah.
Good.
Keep up the good work.
We'll try our best.
And then you had some information for us on streaming county board meetings.
I do. So I put this as a separate agenda item for our viewers mostly. We have been working on moving toward putting our videos on YouTube. All of our stored videos are stored on YouTube now, so when you go look at the meetings later on, you'll see them, the links that actually play off of YouTube, and that's been working very well for us. We've been streaming online on YouTube since July, and we've done some adjustments to it over time, but I think it's working pretty well. So for those viewers we have out there that are watching us right now on Windows Media Player, this is going to be the last meeting we broadcast through Windows Media Player. So the next time they click the live view, it's going to be on the YouTube platform, which has been available, but I just want our viewers to know that they'll see it. They may see it differently. That's for the folks watching live right now. Something else we started just today is we're streaming live on Facebook, and it seemed to be working when I checked.
When I was stopped waiting for a train on the way to get here, I got a notification that Clay County was streaming their board meeting on Facebook, so thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So we'll, I don't know how, we'll see how it works. Today's our first try with that one, but we'll keep trying to do that. But I just really wanted to come and talk to our viewers and tell them that we're making some changes, and I think it's working good. I think that it's going to be a good tool and plus it's, the nice part about why I mentioned it before, why we're doing it is, it's multi-platform friendly. You can watch on your phone, you can watch on your computer, your iPad, doesn't matter what.
And I think to be creative in how we get meetings out to people, I think to hit people that you may not normally do it, I think them to know is important.
Yes. Okay.
Thanks, Mark.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Thank you. Dave, come on up. Next item is request for approval to replace 2 highway department vehicles. Morning, Dave.
Morning. I would like to get approval to replace 2 of our units in our fleet. Unit 101, which is a 2013 Acadia, and Unit 114, which we wouldn't actually trade. I'm actually looking at trading in the Acadia on a new one. 114 would get traded down or handed down to our road foreman. He does a lot of road checking, and we want to give him a vehicle that would allow him to make sure he gets around and covers his south half of the county district. I checked with Lori, we went through the internal service fund. There is adequate funding, as you can see in the spreadsheet, for both vehicles. The purchases are made through Nelson Auto Center in Fergus Falls. It's through a cooperative purchasing program. I checked with Lori and I went through it, and there's a 95-page bid packet that they send out to about 50 different vendors. There's only the one vendor from Fergus Falls, which is kind of nice. It's somewhat local versus going down to the Twin Cities area for purchase of these vehicles.
So what will happen to the maroon truck?
The one
Is
that
that
Kim
the-
drives right now,
Right.
that'll go to Kevin Brasseth. So that'll mean, right now, he's using a 2012 GMC that will maintain that one. And we still have a couple of two-wheel drive vehicles. It's kind of hard for our guys to check roads in the wintertime with the two wheels, but we're slowly kind of filtering those out.
Okay, the board's wishes?
I know I've said this before, and I appreciate that Nelson is local on the Minnesota side, but we do enough purchasing through Sheriff's Department and fleet vehicles and yours. Why can't we get a cooperative purchasing agreement in Moorhead through one of the dealers?
The only answer I got from the Lakes Country Cooperative was that a lot of the dealers don't really deal in fleet, I guess. They say fleet's a little different animal. I guess that's the only answer I'd have.
Right.
We did go get a quote across the river from from Luther, but it wasn't a competitive bid the way it is. So I'd have to go do a lot more. I could have went and got 3 of those type of bids, but the cooperative purchasing is so nice if and when they do it.
I mean, there's a Ford dealer in Holly. I mean, that's
Right.
what I'm not. I mean, you can't take this number to them and say,
I'd have
we
to go
want to purchase in Clay County.
You'd have to have them submit their bid through the
Okay.
Lakes Country program.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic if they would.
I just think that maybe we should push harder on that. I'd really appreciate purchasing these in Clay County.
Exactly.
Okay.
Move to approve, sir.
Motion to approve, we have second.
Second.
Motion and second, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Thanks, Dave. Kirk, come on up, we'll do the addition, so. He's gonna make you do it on your own, so.
Yeah, that's all right. Nice surprise for you, Mr. Chair, as I spilled yogurt on my shirt, so.
So we've got the addition here for approval of landfill staff reorganization. We had a PIC meeting yesterday and discussed this extensively, and I think this is part of Kirk's plan for sometime in the future. There'll be some other changes, but you want to?
Yeah, that's right,
Tell us what you
Mr.
want,
Chair.
Kirk.
Essentially, what I have in mind is this is a kind of a reorganization at the landfill. I'm going to be, I hope to create 2 positions. Neither one of the positions are new positions. They aren't going to be new positions, so there's not going to be any additional people hired out there. It's essentially to replace Larry Henry, his position. But what I've done is I've split up the position into two people having one responsibility. And what I come before you today with is what I call the environmental technician. And this particular position will be responsible for taking care of the scale, making sure we get accurate measurements at the scale. Also be responsible for all the billing. All the billing will be done out there. This person will also be doing all the environmental testing as far as wells and leachate, gas flare, things like that. Be in charge of litter detail and things like that. In the future, what I hope to do is come before you and have a site supervisor, and that person will actually be responsible for overall supervision of the landfill. After discussion yesterday, I think Grant and Steve and Darren and myself came to the agreement that at this time it's appropriate to come before you for the environmental technician position, and we need to rework the position description a bit more for the landfill supervisor and come back at a later date for that. So I am requesting you to approve this particular position and move forward from there. And I stand ready to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Kirk. Questions for Kirk on this? Yeah, we had extensive discussion on this yesterday, and I think it's a good plan, and, you know, it's always good timing when you have a long-term employee leave, and then to reevaluate what they were doing and how you can make things work better out there, so. On the board's wishes.
Make a motion to approve the reorganization.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the request. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Thanks, Kurt.
Very good, thank you much.
Appreciate it. Okay, committee reports, Jenny.
Thank you. Last week, I attended the Small Cities meeting at the Law Enforcement Center. Really good dialogue about the economic development organizations that are at work in Clay County. I was happy to hear about the partnership with Lakes Country, or
West Central.
West Central, I apologize. Because that had been a question from this board, to make sure that they're bouncing ideas off of each other. I think that to hear dialogue between the smaller cities and hear what they're doing and how we can help collaborate, that was important. I think we could probably benefit from more of those discussions, but worthwhile as always. I attended the law library meeting last week as well. We renewed the contract for legal services. It appears as though the law library is being used. The numbers are going up for usage. The Westlaw terminals, especially in the jail, are seeing substantial increases in terms of their usage, so that's good. And then I also attended Lakes and Prairies meeting. The board was meeting in terms of vision and goals for upcoming programs and whatnot, so that was informative. And then yesterday I attended a Lakeland mental health meeting at the Detroit Lakes office. They're celebrating 70 years, so that's quite a big accomplishment for them. One big item is that currently the children's day treatment programs for Moorhead, Holly, and Barnesville are seeing substantial losses. Last month the margin was negative $205,000. So there are some critical dialogues happening between the Moorhead School District and social services in Lakeland to see if it's a billing issue. Moorhead had recently taken over the billing and had identified that it was difficult to bill to some of these kiddos. So in hopes that Lakeland will take that back over. That's a very important program that serves Clay County, and so I think we need to stay on top of that because I'd hate to see us lose that. That's important. And they're currently working with a group. They're experiencing about 32% no-show rates organization-wide, and that's common in dealing with people with mental illness, but the group that they're working with could hope to decrease that by up to 10%, and that would really make a difference in margins. And then one other item that was interesting is Otter Tail County is currently working on, the commissioners made an action to provide 5,000 new affordable homes in Otter Tail County. And part of the reason is that Tuffy's recently is not expanding in Perham because of their lack of workforce that they can attract. They're developing in Delano instead of in Perham, and so the commissioners are identifying that lack and trying to help bring in some more people, so that's interesting. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, Thursday morning, on the 19th, I attended the Greater Portland Board Economic Development meeting, and that one, we had a presentation on where we're at with our budget and the goals of the staff, and you know, some of it was a 2-year goal that they're working on, and they are on target on many of them. We did have some more discussion on membership, and they, you know, their goal is to probably increase more on the private side of membership versus the public. I think that's one of the goals. They're trying to do better there. I do want to say that on October 29th, I think for everybody who might be watching, or they do host an FM welcome party, and it's really a good event, and we basically invite everybody who's new to the area to come on that night and see what Fargo-Moorhead has to offer, for new people, so they get a better idea of what our community is all about. And again, they can get more information by going to fmwelcomeparty.com, and they can find out more information there. That evening, I also attended the local cities and counties meeting at our law enforcement center, and I think the topic was timely, and I think having the different presenters there, I noticed that the member cities that were there enjoyed hearing and got value out of hearing what the other presenters had to offer. I am disappointed in the number of cities that turned out. I wish we could have had more. Again, that seems like it's a constant topic that we have. I found it, one of the things that I found interesting is Karen Lauer, who is the Economic Development Director for Barnesville. She made a point of talking about the HRA and how some of those programs actually have benefited their economic development in their community through housing and through small business. And so as we struggle, and we've talked about that funding piece, I think that's important to note that we had an economic development director, and a good one, by the way, well respected throughout the area, made positive comments regarding that. And I think we have to take note of that, that there was some successes there. And then on yesterday morning, I did attend the audit exit meeting for the county, and I thought I was going to go in there and maybe this was going to be a 10-minute deal, but I barely got out of there in time to go from one meeting to another. And there's some things this year that we're going to have to look at. I think coming out, I think that audit will become public on Friday, and I'm sure the State Auditor's Office will give a presentation to this board sometime after that. And there were some findings, and there's findings every year. And we had some of our staff there, and the idea is then how do we make corrective actions for those audit issues that have come up. And we will have that correction plan. So. Then right after that, I had the Diversion Authority Chairs Coordinating Meeting, and there's some discussion about, looks like there's going to be a trip to Washington, D.C. on the 21st and 22nd. I think right now the plan will be that hopefully Mayor Judd can be there for Minnesota. I think Joel Paulson is hopefully going to be able to go there. I cannot make that meeting, and I did ask our administrator if he'd have interest in going to one of those. I think it might be good for him to go to one sometime, and whether or not he's needed at this one, that was, they weren't quite sure. I think Matt Chiller, who's our, lobbyist in Washington, maybe thought that if Joel went, that might be good enough for this time around. So, but I just want to say that I think it would be good for our administrator to maybe go and see what that's all about in Washington, D.C. in one of these. We spent quite a bit of time talking about the financial plan. We're going to be coming out with a more detailed financial plan here very shortly that shows how the project will be paid for. And what this really talks about is the timeline for paying the bills to construct the project and where the money's going to be coming from to pay for the project. Once that's done, then what would be left in loans, the Fargo and Cass County sales tax is scheduled to be able to make all those loan payments for the loan portion of the funding mechanism that we have that is not covered by the state of North Dakota and the federal government and what Minnesota ends up putting into it. So more to come on that real soon. We talked about the Clomore outreach. I think we're going to have a presentation here at our next meeting.
Yes.
On the Clomar, revised Clomar, and basically what that does is that changes the floodplain through FEMA based on the project being completed. And that ultimately then gives us a better detail of where the floodplain changes and how much. So we know who we can better talk to the landowners that are involved. It pins down the floodplain area. And on the 16th of October, Major General Toy from St. Paul will be visiting us on the 16th, and we'll be talking with him more. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Frank.
I went to last Wednesday at the Historical Society meeting. There again, things are going well as far as attendance over to the Historical Society. They're having a fairly good year, and admissions and stuff. Donations are coming in good too. But the main subject over there is rent payments. Right now they don't pay rent for the building, and there again there's been a request to have them starting to pay rent, and I don't know how it'll all work out with this morning's news of more probably selling over there, whether that involves I don't know if it involves the Youngkin Center or not, but whatever. But those are the main discussions there, because do we have to adjust the budget for the Historical Society? Because when they originally submitted their budget, that was not included, that extra money for rent payments. So.
Frank, do they have any sort of reserve?
No, there isn't much there. It's a bear. They just make it each year, pretty much.
It seems as though the trend with rent requests, they should start earmarking something in anticipation for if that were to.
It's a very serious discussion over there as far as should we pay some rent, should we do no rent, or whatever, you know, it's just. And also, as far as the gift shop, if you're not aware of it, do your Christmas shopping over the gift shop over there. They got a lot of different items over there, so I'm sure you want to start over there for your Christmas shopping. So again, as already been mentioned, the small cities meeting, I agree with Commissioner Campbell as far as 4 cities showing up for that. I wish there would have been more, because Steve, if you lined up that presentation, that was just a great presentation given by Karen Lauer and Derek and Greg Wagner from WCA, West Central Initiative. I mean, they gave good presentations and a lot of good information there, you know. I don't know, that's probably the one that should streamline or something like that. That was a good presentation. I appreciate what, and also our staff, you know, I'm so happy to see our staff there. I mean, they were willing to be there to present, you know, to answer questions and stuff like that. That was good to see a good, I mean, we must have had a dozen or more people there sitting there waiting to answer questions, and that was good. Final thing I have is, I know in our facility meetings, we haven't had one for a month or so, whatever, but I see there's a house for sale around, if you drive around the block, there's a house for sale. And one of the discussions we have always looked at is, should we start buying houses within a block of
That way or this way?
This way, right now it's south, but I don't know, expansion, which way we want to go. If we ever do want to expand, say we do need a new facility, should we be looking at these houses that are for sale within the first block of the courthouse, you know? And I just see there's one for sale now, and should we be looking at that? Just a thought. That's my report.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. On September 19th, on Thursday, I also attended the Small Cities meeting at the Law Enforcement Center and agree with the things that were said by the other commissioners. And then I had to leave the Small Cities meeting and go to the Lake Agassiz Regional Library Board of Trustees meeting. And we had the financial report. The budget's 66% of projected. It's all on track. And they're going to be looking at library lobbying at the Minnesota Legislature in 2020. We discussed a readmobile versus a bookmobile. Big old gas guzzling bookmobile is very costly to keep going, and the new trend now is to get a van called a readmobile to do kind of the same thing. And so they're looking at funding on that. And then on Friday, I attended the Clay County Early Childhood Initiative meeting, and we had a presentation from Lacey from MSUM and Ashley from the Independent School District number 152 on the pre-K to grade 3 alignment theory that's being debated among professionals about this. And they have been meeting since February 2019 under the auspices of the West Central Initiative to explore options as far as this theory of pre-K to grade 3 alignment. And that is my report.
Thank you. Let's see, I had the EDC meetings last week, and Commissioner Campbell reported on those. I had a big meeting yesterday, and we already discussed that issue at this meeting, so that's it for me. Steve? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. After board last week, we met with our labor attorney on the legal matter, ongoing legal matter here in the county. On the 18th, participated in the administrative advisory meeting with the diversion. Talked about the construction updates, the financial updates, and upcoming board meetings and committee meetings this week. That afternoon, I met with the mobile mental health crisis unit with social service and public health present. Again, just working to continue to establish protocol in hopes of diverting our citizens with mental health issues from jail and ambulance runs. We met with James O'Donnell and Darren that afternoon in regards to some variable hour issues or discussion at the West Central Regional Juvenile Center. On the 19th, we had a central administration meeting. We talked about the sidewalk project, landscaping on campus. There's new signage up at the DMV. The wage study negotiations were some of the topics that we talked on. So on the 19th, again, I participated in the city county meeting, and you guys have well covered that. I do want to thank again our presenters and also our department heads for participating. Our next meeting will be scheduled for 2020 in April. We did ask for if any cities were wanting to host. We didn't get any takers, and so at least as of right now, we'll probably be looking to host at the Law Enforcement Center again.
No, we talk about attendance, and maybe we need to, there are some people that have never been, and so maybe we need to change how we get the information to those people. The information or avenues aren't probably applicable. I know Queen does a great job, but it just might not work for them. So, I don't know if it would be helpful to have one of us go to the city council meetings or whatever, but I think maybe if we were to change how we get the information out, we may get more people.
Sure, okay. On the 23rd, I participated in the state audit exit meeting. Commissioner Campbell has discussed that. Again, he mentioned hopefully we'll be getting our final report on Friday. I will forward that to you once we receive that, and we'll set up a future meeting to address it here at the full board. Participated in the DA chair coordination meeting that Commissioner Campbell has addressed. Also the PIC issues, Kirk's issue that was addressed today. We also spoke with Georgia on the custodian issue and discussed the mailroom social service position that she has. Just a couple different things just to keep you up to date. They did have a meeting last week with the city of Moorhead on the bus stop. They were talking about moving the bus stop to the south, which would have impacted parking. What they came to, I think, to an agreement is they're going to move it actually to the north on the other side of the stop sign. And so they'll be looking next spring at repouring some concrete, might be a tree removal. But that change will be happening. I think it'll be beneficial. Just to keep you notify you, Lori was recently notified by the IRS that they're planning to conduct an audit on the tax exemption status on correctional center. There isn't necessarily any issue from that perspective, just that we were selected. And Lori has put in a formal request to delay that audit until the completion of phase 2, and so we should be hearing on that fairly soon. Just following up with, I've been sharing with the wild rice in Becker County issue and redistricting of management. As we talked, I think last week, Bowser had indicated, had some questions of why Becker County would like to move forward. County Administrator Breathhorst reached out this past week looking at the possibility of setting up a meeting with our commissioner and myself, and potentially our planning and zoning people to see if there's any other I guess, agreement that we can do outside of the agreement through the wild rice.
Steve, I had a long conversation with Commissioner Scarry from Becker County yesterday in regards to this, and just curious as to better understanding why their request is that. And it sounds as though the Becker County Board just doesn't understand why it was that way in the first place, and the questions never really had been asked why it was decided that Clay County make the decisions. It's not stemming from anything. It just is a matter of housekeeping to give them the authority to appoint their member.
And I think my understanding through the difference between the Buffalo Red and the wild rice is that we're in our districts, we're connected with one other county, and the county that's the larger county defaults to the appointment. But okay, that's beneficial. Just to touch on Commissioner Gross's comments about master planning, we do have a meeting. We do have a meeting next Monday. Our previous meeting was canceled due to the fact that they received some additional information that they wanted more time to assess. I think we're getting to the point where we're going to start seeing some potential options that they'll be presenting to us as early as next Monday. And then just my last thing is that there's going to be a Veterans Court graduation next on the September 25th, courtroom 1 at 12:15. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Okay. Any other thing to come before the board? Seeing none, we're adjourned.